Yes, my dear students, good morning and a very hearty welcome to this morning session of Theodicy. Well, we had the general introduction and then we moved on to clarify certain notions. Clear? Yes. And then we are still with the same ideas. First of all, we said instead of existence, non-existence, we prefer to go with the expressions or the categories of presence, absence. And then we started explaining why and in what way presence, absence is a better category or are better categories for a meaningful God talk compared to or than to existence and non-existence, and the implicit characteristics or implications of absence presence we have dealt with, and then we moved on after that to godlessness and atheism. We defined what is godlessness and what is atheism. Yes, the students will remember clearly the distinction that we have made. One is godlessness is a practical way of living. Practical way of living. You know, you should, as students of third year philosophy, should be with your critical mind. Therefore, yes, this is a practical way of living. Godlessness. Follow? Yeah, it's a practical way of living. And then atheism is the theoretical formulation. Go through your notes, the definition given. So, it's a practical way of living without acknowledging the presence of God. Clear? Yes, a practical way. And then atheism is the theoretical formulation of this practical way of living. Yeah, that's the thing. Follow? You should very critically follow it. A practical way. Yes, I'm not worried about, I'm worried about my life, I construct my life. Yes, I am concerned about others and all that. It's a practical way of living. And well, while talking about God, what's not my, you don't say concern, but then I'm not interested how much to talk about it. But then, atheism is a theoretical articulation. Therefore, well, certain things are implicit in the definition. And that is what we are going to analyze now. What does it mean? How this godlessness, atheism, how and in what way it is different from belief in God. This is something as philosophy, students of theodicy, well, we should make the distinctions and then how, in and what way this group of people, atheists and the godlessness and atheism, in what way and how it is different from faith in God or belief in God. And that is what is going to be the reflection. And then we move on to different types of godlessness and atheism. That will be the second part of this particular chapter. So, first we formulate it, and then in what way it is different from belief in God. We need to know it. Whether there is a distinction at all. If there is a distinction, how narrow or how wide is the distinction? In other words, how this godless people and atheists are, in what way they are different from people who believe, if there is a difference at all. In what way? How much is the degree of distinction? Or width? How much is the width? Is it only too narrow or too wide a distinction between these two groups? Or do you find among them also people of this sort? Or do you find among them also people of this sort? Hope the ideas are clear. Therefore, that's what is going to be, yes, in this particular lesson. And then we go into the different types of, yes, godlessness and atheism. That is what is going to be the summary of what we are going to do today. Okay. So we have already defined what is godlessness and what is atheism. Yes, once again, for a brushing of your memory, godlessness actually is a practical way of living, life and living, which has a fundamental ethical option, whereby man wants to live his life without acknowledging God's presence. He needs to be responsible from within. He doesn't want to depend on something else or someone else. Okay. When we come again to atheism, it distinguishes or it designates an explicit expression and formulation of godlessness. So, in other words, a theoretical formulation of, okay, for example, in art, in films, etc., it is followed by a theoretical justification of godlessness. So, we say fundamentally atheism is the formulation of a living experience of a belief in man combined with a conviction that man's priority is to live for justice and liberate man from all oppressions. So that is, and now we are going to analyze a little bit these two definitions, and we are trying to say whether it is altogether different from belief in God, or whether it is similar. If it is altogether different, how far? If it is similar, or we find also a person who says that he believes has also the elements of practical way of living without God, and sometimes he also, yes, pretends to be a believer but an atheist or a godless man. All that is so. I hope it is clear. More than this explanation, yes, will make me, yes, uneasy, because it's too much. Now, next paragraph. Their relationship with belief in God is ambiguous for two reasons. Now, that is what we want to say. Yes. Godlessness and atheism, their relationship with belief in God. There is another category of people who say, publicly profess that they believe in God and they live by the instructions of God and all that. So, their relationship with the belief in God is ambiguous for two reasons. Not very clear. In other words, this distinction between, yes, people who believe in God and a practical way of godlessness and atheism are ambiguous, not very clear. Why? Yes, as we go you will understand. I don't want to. First of all, even in the case of a believer, yes, even in the case of a believer claiming God's presence does not live in his everyday life, yes, as if God is existing. So, in other words, yes, a very simple sentence. What is that? Even a believer, one who profess that he believes in God, sometimes in life, well, it cannot be denied. Sometimes in life, live as if there is no God. Yes. In other words, sometimes he becomes like a practical person, a godless man. Sometimes he also expresses sometimes sentences of atheist. Therefore, we cannot. So that is why we say it is ambiguous for two reasons. First of all, yes, this distinction. Sometimes the believer himself lives as if a godless man or an atheist. So that is the first point. And then this means, what does it mean? This means that the believer claiming God's presence does not live in his everyday life as if God is existing. Very, very clear. And then, secondly, the second reason. In other words, sometimes we, the believers also, confronted with realities beyond our grasp, we also ask, where is God? This is the truth. The others, they are not at all worried, but then the believer also is at times. Yes, like the death of the beloved ones or disaster. You work every day and then finally when it is time to take the fruit, harvest the fruit, you lose everything. So you lose heart and you make also statements, yes, similar to others. But then, in other words, the believer also sometimes lives as if God doesn't exist. That's one point. Secondly, we say godlessness has a fundamental option. Yes, that is what the first sentence. It's a practical way of living, an ethical life. Yes, only he is not worried about, yes, God or God's proving God's existence. Now, we say, well, here too, sometimes we go on living our practical life, what we believer also sometimes we don't wake God up every day. We make prayer and all that is, but then we don't ask, oh, where are you and all that is. So, we also live as if, yes, that is the second point. Godlessness as a fundamental life option which is totally, yes, godlessness has a fundamental option which is not totally alien to the believer's life. In other words, yes, godless people also are ethical people. Godless people are also ethical people. They are concerned about themselves and also about others' well-being. Therefore, we cannot simply call them that they are selfish people. That's the point. Okay, alien to the believer's life. Many believing people sometimes recognize themselves with the beliefs of the godless or atheist. That's the point. So, in other words, yes, in practical way, believer also is falling in line with sometimes with the godless and the atheist. So that is the 2 points that we need to talk. Because from this we are going to draw also a conclusion. Then we will ask, who is then a believer? Follow. Yes. So then some interesting reflections will come. I don't anticipate it. So the real question before us, if as we have just seen the relationship of godlessness or atheism with belief in God is not distinct or it is ambiguous. And then the question, where is the believer? Yes, at least from the point of view of the believer. The godless and the atheist may not be worried, but the believer should be worried about it because he needs to live and he is the one who professes. So, where is the believer? Yes. Who is a believer? Yes. These questions to be addressed or we need to find answers. So, who is a believer? Our answer is, yes, you may have to underline 1,000 times. Our answer is, belief is a task. Is a task. Means a responsibility. A task to be accomplished. A task to be realized in everyday life. This is the point. Not that, yes, somebody baptize you and then you are a Christian. No. Every day we need to live up to that call. We live up to that cause. We make clear through our life, I am a believer. In other words, it is a responsibility. It is something to be accomplished. It is a task. Not that simply you go and sleep. Every day through your life you need to be just, responsible, hardworking, and all that is part of this believer. So that's the thing. So in other words, belief is a task. It is an ongoing process. Ongoing process. What does it mean? Not once in a week, once in a month, once in a year activity, but it is an ongoing. Means every day, every moment, you need to be a just man. You need to be an honest man. You need to be a sincere man. Not once in a full moon, but rather it's an ongoing task. A task, an ongoing process. What do you mean by process? Process has its own continuity. Okay. It is a conflict also. Clear. A conflict. Yes, what does it mean? A conflict. A conflict between a disbelief and belief. You need to be falling in line with belief. At times you will be tempted severely to go as if a practical man, a godless man, or an atheist. You are tempted, pulled in. But then, yes, a belief, a conflict. In that conflict, you should come out and affirm your faith and go around. So it is an ongoing process. It is a task, it's a responsibility. All these words are to be there in your answer. Yes, belief is a task. It is a responsibility for an ongoing process of trust in God. Yes, we can also call it a conflict between the godless and the atheist and the belief. You need to be faithful to it. Yes, something, now things become clear as we proceed. So in other words, it's a belief, it's a task, it's an ongoing process, a conflict, a tension between. Yes, you will understand as you grow in your faith. Yes, it's like mustard seed. Start growing. And so the moment you become part of that growth and you realize it, yes, you realize also all these aspects. So in other words, well, it's a task. Believing is a task. It's a responsibility. It's something to be accomplished or developed in one's own life. It's an ongoing process. It's a conflict. It's a tension. So these three, 1, 2, 3 will go in line, and then we take also the other side. In other words, when you compare the believing person with an atheist or a godless man, well, there is also a conflict and a tension. Why a conflict and a tension? You should have clarity, because you also find within yourself elements of atheism. You also find at times in your life, you like to live as if like a godless man. Therefore, there is a tension. In letter to the Romans, you find St. Paul talking about this tension. Yes, I like to do good, but then often I do, yes, not what I like. Yes, I like to be a good person, but then often I fall into temptations of, yes, badness. Wretched that I am, who will deliver me from? So in other words, there is a conflict, there is a tension within the believer, not to succumb to an atheism or a practical way of godlessness, but rather to be believing in God. So things are very clear. So a tension between belief and non-belief. Yes, or conflict between belief and, yes, non-belief. Yes, daily going to church or temple and all, when they are confronted with, yes, realities beyond their grasping, they simply also ask questions exactly like atheists or anybody else. But that doesn't mean that they are atheists. But then there is a conflict. So therefore, the conclusion will be, yes, an interesting one. We will wait for the conclusion, not now. So, a tension between belief and non-belief is also found in the believer. Okay, tension between belief and disbelief. So we cannot really say, I am a believer. Yes, we cannot simply say, I am a believer. Why? I find within myself also unbelief. I find within myself also, yes, elements of atheism. Therefore, what we can say, that is what is going to be the conclusion of that one. What is that? Yes. So we cannot really say, I am a believer. But the perfect expression would be, I am becoming a believer. I am becoming a believer. Yes, my dear students, being and becoming. Becoming is a process. Becoming is a task. Here. Becoming is a task. It is an ongoing process. It is something to be accomplished. Becoming is not a finished product. Let us be very, very clear about it. Therefore, yes, I am becoming a believer. I am not a believer. In other words, I am not 100% a believer. Well, I find within myself disbelief. I find within myself elements of atheism. I find within myself, yes, elements of godlessness. Sometimes I speak, yes, ethics is enough. I can go within myself and then I do charity of 1/10 of all what I have. I give to the poor. I am a good man. But then my question is, how long will you go on with such a life? Afterwards, you also will become tired. And slowly you begin to, yes, give up all your practices. You say 1/10, yes, why should? Others are not giving, another temptation coming. Yes, others are not giving, why should I give? If I had collected all what 1/10 I had given, I would have had another 10 acres of land. You look at from the practical way, you become like a godless man. Sometimes you become like an atheist. But then, yes, it's a process, a becoming, so that every day you need to renew yourself. And then you find ethics alone cannot stand on its own leg. Therefore, you need to place it in a higher orbit, and that is God. In other words, well, it's not all what we do that is, yes, God is rewarding. Therefore, well, believing in God is a becoming process. Well, brothers, students, let us be very, very clear about it. Yes, people with 100% surety, when they give you corrections, also remember that those who with 100% surety, when they talk also, they have elements of godlessness and atheism in their life. Sometimes that may be projected much on you. This also happens. Therefore, look at, yes, belief is a task. We said it's a responsibility. It's an ongoing process. All these should be there in your answer. And at times there is also a conflict and tension between belief and disbelief. Therefore, we ask, who is a believer? We don't find a true believer here on earth. Therefore, yes, so the most gentle, most decent, most honest expression would be, I am becoming a believer. So give importance to this becoming. Being, becoming, clear. So in the medieval philosophy, you studied it, and so it's clear for you. So this process of becoming, yes, there is not something to take place once in a full moon, but rather an activity of everyday life. An activity, a process of everyday life. Things are clear, I suppose. Now we say some more reflections about it. But then this is the point. So the godlessness and atheism we defined, and then if godlessness and atheism has a sound ethical life, then how it is different from a believer, or these people, group of people, or godlessness and atheism are different from a believer. And then therefore we said, yes, there is a conflict. Believing is a process, a task, a responsibility, something to be accomplished, an ongoing process. Also we find within the believer a conflict and a tension. It's not simply an easy way, a very clear path. No, at times we struggle. There is a tension, a struggle. The word struggle also could be part of it. Yes, struggle, tension, conflict, to be true to your belief. Therefore, who is a believer? Yes, the most gentle, honest expression is that I am becoming a believer. Good. Well, something more about godlessness and atheism. It is a situational one. In other words, you fall into a crisis. A crisis is a situation. You go normally with your life. You fall into an accident. You break your leg, break your head. You begin to ask questions. Therefore, from the point of view of believer, point of view of Theodicy, we say, yes, atheism and godlessness are a situational factor. You ask questions when you find you are being drawn into a particular situation from which you don't find any hope to come out. Therefore, you ask questions. So, in other words, godlessness and atheism is also something that is a situational one. Let's see what it is. So, the real question, okay, godlessness and atheism have a relative and situational meaning. Yes, two words are to be noted. Relative and situational meaning. Yes. Godlessness and atheism have a situational and relational meaning. Situational, you understand? Situational and atheism have a relative in relation to something. Yes, in relation to something, and in a particular situation it has a meaning. Yes. Relative and situational meaning. Okay. As a negative syllable, less, that is what I said, God, lessness. Less of God. So, situational. In this particular situation, I am confronted with negatives only. I am not able to find positive. So, it's a situational one. In other words, in this particular situation, I find myself in difficulty. So, less of Godness. Therefore, I also say, to theism, atheism. No to theism, no to God. The situation is such an overwhelming one. I am not able to find meaning anywhere. Therefore, I say no. I say godlessness. Why? It is a relative and situational meaning. Clear? Yeah. So that's the thing. That's something very interesting. Yes. As a negative syllable, less in godlessness. Clear? That's what we are talking. Less, and as the prefix atheism, indicates the negation. Indicates the negation. That's why, as philosophy students, when you read a sentence, every word is communicative. Every sentence is communicative. Not that simply we read and finish it. No. For me, after having gone into empiricism, I'm fully convinced that we need to make only sentences that are relevant to our experience. In other words, yes, today is a sunny day. Yes, when you say it's a sunny day, well, we need to verify it. When it is overpouring rain, you don't say it's a sunny day or it's a wonderful day. You call it a rainy day. Why? There is something about which you are talking, and there is a corresponding reality outside. It's not simply a correspondence theory, but rather, yes, I feel hungry. If your stomach is full and you cannot even breathe, if you say, I feel hungry, well, you are fooling yourself or ridiculing yourself. Nobody will believe you later. And we have also seen you eating like anything in the morning, and after 10 minutes, if you say, I feel hungry, yes, it is difficult. So in other words, well, you find this is something, yes, in a conflicting situation, in a particular situation where you don't find any hope and all, yes, you say, hey, no. Yes, if there is God, it would not have happened to my son. Yes, you hear from the villages and all, from our own friends. Yes, no, I don't want, yes, come to the church and all. No, I will come after some time. Why? Less is being felt of the presence of God. So, in other words, what I want to say is, yes, the language is something very important. Language is expressing the truth, what is in your mind. Therefore, read the sentences carefully and try to get the meaning. And if you don't get the meaning, try to distinguish, differentiate, and then you will know the meaning of it. So, here too, syllable less, and as the prefix a indicates negation, we should see that this negation takes the meaning from what it opposes. Clear? That's clear. Okay. So when we refer to the terms godlessness and atheism, we mean, yes, that they are terms opposing to the many forms of godlessness and atheism that are represented in various given situations. That's why we said, yes, this is only a situational one and a relative one with reference to something. So in other words, in a particular situation you say, yes, that is the point. So our conclusion that rejection or denial of God is to be understood situationally, and we need to recognize the lack of clarity when we identify these terms with disbelief. So we need to be also very careful. Clear? Atheism and godlessness, they are not simply denying that God doesn't exist. No. Less of God or no to God, less of God. So you just now look into the definition of godlessness. It's a practical way of living. But they are not saying that God doesn't exist. Yeah, God doesn't exist. Atheists, yeah, that's only they are telling that we can live this way. They are not saying, not disproving the existence of God. Keep in mind. Yes. Expression godlessness and atheism are not two negative meaning. We say because many of the atheistic systems and the atheists themselves uphold values that are upheld by the believer. So in other words, underline that sentence too. Clear? Yeah, the atheists and godless people are holding on to values that are also values dear to the theist. Yes, God's love and all that. Our analysis of these two terms indicates that we should not be, yes, a very key sentence. Our analysis of these two terms means godlessness and atheism, indicates that we should not be too categorical in calling someone atheist or godless. Underline or write it. Clear? We should not be too hasty in a hurry to call someone an atheist or a godless man. Yes, we may even say there is no absolutely unbelieving or disbelieving people. Underline 100 times. As believers, we should not be hasty to condemn someone as unbelieving or disbelieving people. Secondly, we also say that godlessness and atheism are to be understood as a phenomena of a crisis situation. Underline. Yes, godlessness and atheism are a phenomena of a crisis situation. Yes, that is what was explained first. Yes, in a deep crisis, you go on saying lot of nonsensical sentences. Where is God? If God were there, my son would not have been met with an accident and died. Where is God? We have only this paddy field that is also gone with the rain and all that is. Yes, this is all part of godlessness and atheism are a phenomena of a crisis situation. Underline. Crisis situation. And a clear study of atheism would imply that we can distinguish various types of atheism situationally. So, the two expressions, yes, godlessness and atheism are relative and situational. Those 2 points are to be remembered and substantiated with the examples. And now, while we are going into the second part of it, yes, 2:1, yes, what are the different types of godlessness and atheism? So, we said we are not categorically condemning that there are godless people and atheists, but then we say, yes, atheism and godlessness is relative and situational. It is part of a crisis situation. And then, what are the different types? That is what we are going to deal it in the next class. Namely, the types of godlessness and atheism. Thank you.